Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people believe they are the center of the universe. And in today's episode, guys, oh boy, a woman loses it on OP, attacks police, goes mega psycho after OP confiscates her son's toy for harassing him. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's lineup of stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, your stories can be sent right here. Okay, so hearing all these stories, I never would have thought I'd encounter a Karen. So a few weeks back, I was walking home from the train station after work and decided to call my mother. We live several states apart, and she tends to ramble a bit when we talk, so I often use the mile-long walk to give her as much conversation time as she likes. Now, I always have my headphones in with a built-in mic and try to keep my voice at a normal conversational volume. I've never thought anything of it until one day a little Karen crossed my path. About a block into my walk, I had an older woman walking a dog in front of me. The pup was making frequent stops, and naturally, I walk fast. So I go around them when the sidewalk was wide enough and continued on my way, chatting with my mother all the while. A moment later, I realized that a voice was calling to me. I hear, hey, you, stop talking to yourself. Are you on the phone? I then popped my earbud out to listen, and I said, yes. Now that was the wrong answer, apparently. The woman proceeds to lose her mind, shouting that I was being rude and that I needed to stop talking right now because I'm making her uncomfortable, because it looks like I'm talking to myself. It's at this point I tell her that I'm on the phone with someone, and she continues to tell me to just shut up and that I shouldn't be talking out loud in public. I told her that public doesn't mean private and I have the right to talk out loud. She then screams at me that nobody had any respect these days, and she actually followed me for a few blocks yelling and cursing at me. I tried telling her to leave me alone, but she didn't respond directly. She just continued her loud tirade. Finally, at one point she shouts, "Have a precious little life." She then turns down a side street, towing her poor dog behind her, leaving my mother and I to wonder what the heck just happened. Some people can't seem to mind their own business, can they? Oh, I don't like it when you're talking out loud in public. You need to shut up. And wow, guys, I'm always so shocked at how brave these Karens are. She followed OP for blocks just screaming at her like, lady, do you not know that following someone and screaming obscenities at them is a really good way to get smacked or even pepper sprayed? And you know she's not gonna learn her lesson until something like that happens, right? Okay, so I've managed to elude entitled bitches so far, but today of all days, one finally got me. I'm currently cleaning out my house and I have a container in the driveway for this purpose. Logically, that means I cannot park on my driveway. Anyways, in order to not further the already scarce parking possibilities for my neighbors who don't have a driveway, I park in such a way that I stand in front of my driveway and only take up a little parking space, so 3 cars fit wonderfully in this spot. Now, however, Mr. Coincidence had a funny day today and sent me a middle-aged lady, typical Karen haircut, hydrogen blonde, draped in a lot of jewelry and wearing clothes typical of this group. I've lived here for 30 years and know some people and where they live, so I know their addresses too. In case of this Karen, I knew her face, knew what house she lived in, I just didn't know her name. So I get out of my car and was on the pavement when the lady literally whistles at me and says, "How could you even think of parking in this person's driveway? Show some respect." I will call a towing service right away. I know the people who live in this house very well. Now here's a fun fact. I live alone in this house. I own this house now as my parents are dead. I'm also someone who clears things up straight away, but today I thought I'd play along. Anyway, she called the towing service while I calmly leaned against my car waiting for her to finish the call. When I asked her if she was finished and if I could leave now, she just looks at me quizzically with huge eyes and her chin raised. I took that as a yes, dug my keys out of my pocket, and went to the house whose driveway that I was supposedly blocking and whose residence that I was now also blocking. I then unlocked the door, closed it, and watched as Karen's mind exploded. The expression on her face was a real picture for the gods. Instead of waiting for the tow truck to come and sort it out, she just left. So I wait for the towing service. I then explained everything to the guys, showed them the necessary identification papers, and then gave them the lady's address. One of the guys said the lady had to pay for the service, and I hope the bill won't be cheap. I'm thinking of warning the lady, so the shock about the bill won't be so big. But on the other hand, what would you do in this situation? Yeah, guys, I definitely would not warn her at all. She goes out of her way to call a tow truck on you, so just let karma get her. Like, it's just so crazy how some people are so quick to call a tow truck on other people. And guys, I had a neighbor try to police my driveway. So I was out of the country a few months ago, and my one neighbor, he's a pretty good guy, okay? The guy messages me asking if I knew a random car was on my driveway, and to check my cameras, to see if I happen to know someone who drove that car. If not, he had a son who could come tow the car. I mean, yeah, thanks for watching out for my property, but it was crazy how my neighbor was so quick to try to get someone towed. I managed fast food for a while, and one of the best things about my job was how much privilege I was given with deciding what customers were worth keeping. Karens absolutely hated me, and it was fantastic. I was often given the line, "You are the manager?" And I would say, "Yes, ma'am." This is one example of the many Karens that I dealt with on a daily basis. So the Karen would come in and say, "Hey, I picked up food in your drive-thru and drove 30 minutes home, only to find out that my fries were cold." To which I would say, "I'm sorry, but fries only really stay hot for about 5 minutes. There's nothing we can do about your drive home." It's just crazy how many people would demand compensation for something that was so normal. It would usually end with them saying that I'm gonna get fired. And spoiler alert, I never did get fired. Like, it's insane how many Karens try to make up a corporate policy that has never been a thing ever, just to try to make us do something. And some would even try to make their voice bigger by using oddly relative phrases, such as, "Survey says we don't like it." Like, what survey, ma'am? Or "Nobody likes it when you do this," when literally everyone appreciates that. And it's amazing how they would try to get everyone in trouble for food they personally don't like. But my all-time pet peeves with Karens is when they specifically single out pretty girls to try to tear them down, and this does happen too often. I'm not lying, attractive girls on my team got the worst treatment from Karens. I did try my best to take over for them and take the heat though. The most mad I got was over the phone. So usually if you call a restaurant to complain about something, you should ask to speak to a manager. I had a woman call once that crossed the line, basically saying that pretty girls are incapable of working and doing their job properly. On this day, the Karen calls in and I pick up and say, "Hello, this is restaurant so-and-so. What can I do for you?" The Karen, who I could tell was really angry on the phone, said, "I would like to speak with Shauna." Fake name. I say, "May I tell her who's calling?" The woman says, "My name's Karen, but she doesn't know me. I'm a customer she saw earlier." Now with that, I can see where this is going, and I tell her, "Hey, Shauna's working right now. I'm the manager. Is there something I can help you with?" The woman proceeds to say, "She gave me my food earlier. I asked for extra ketchup and I only got 5 packets. She then gave me my drink too full, so it came out of the lid and some spilled into my car. I really need to talk with her and teach her how to handle an order. Girls like her need to learn how to do the job properly, so give the phone to her." I tell her actually the standard amount of ketchup for one meal is 3 packets, so she did give you extra. Also, she didn't fill up your drink, someone else does that. And this is exactly why complaints come through a manager. It's my job to direct my employees when they have done something wrong. I tell her it's completely inappropriate for you to try to speak with her yourself. I believe she mentioned you. She told me a lady comes through that was very condescending despite her being professional and intentionally kind. She's one of my best employees, she's hardworking, attentive, kind, and respectful to customers and coworkers. Not to mention, she's one of the fastest cleaners that I've ever seen. This is also a franchise restaurant, not a chain. Therefore, it's private property. And I'm officially informing you that you're no longer welcome on our property. And if you come here again, we can have you arrested for trespassing. It was at that point the woman just hangs up, but not before giving me the biggest F you over the phone that I've ever gotten. We never did hear from her again. Can I just say how much I love that OP stands up for the employees? I say that because I know so many managers who just give customers what they want and then berate staff, and I'm glad OP was team staff. So this person comments, "I threw a chicken nugget at a Karen once. She was yelling at our cashier for screwing up her order because she only got 9 nuggets instead of 10. She was being rude as F to the cashier and the shift leader. So I threw a nugget at her and said, 'Here's your nugget, you rude ass.' The manager was not pleased until she left." Yeah guys, I worked fast food for a year and I definitely don't miss those customers at all. Alright, this story begins with myself and my dog in the backyard, to which we'd been banished because the inside of my house was being painted at the time. So while we were outside killing time, waiting for the house to be dog safe again, I discovered that I very much had to go to the bathroom. And since my backyard is pretty well secluded, I decided to go then and there. After the sigh of satisfaction and before the stream had finished, that's when I heard a very high-pitched whining sound. And that's when I looked up to see what the sound was, and I see a quadrotor drone floating above my backyard, presumably watching me. I don't really have a shy bladder, so I finished what I was doing, put myself away, and went back to my regularly scheduled dog entertainment programming. Later that day after dinner, there was a knock on my door, and upon opening it, I see a very uncomfortable looking police officer. He asked if I could step outside to speak with him, and I did so. He then asked me if I had urinated in my yard recently, and when I raised an eyebrow and sort of looked at him like, seriously? He clarified that someone had called in and reported me for doing so, and the report has to be investigated since I live so close to a school. I confirmed that, and I showed the officer where I'd done so, and told him that the only people that had seen me was my dog, and someone flying a drone over my backyard, and I was sure my dog hadn't phoned the cops on me. The officer thanked me for my explanation and said that I very likely was not in trouble, but he would take it as a favor if I just used the toilet for the time being. The next day, my dog was outside by himself sun worshipping while I was working. I had the door open in case he started barking at the neighbors or what have you. Suddenly, he lets loose his fiercest war cry and he starts making distress noises. And that's when I look outside to see what's going on, and there's a quadrotor buzzing around my dog. I do what anyone should do in that situation and grab my hose, set the nozzle to anti-aircraft, and zap the drone with the hose. The drone ceases operation and falls to the ground in my dog run. I then took my dog and drone inside and waited because I know someone was gonna come for it later. About an hour later, my doorbell rings, and there's a 12 or 13-year-old kid on my steps with a bike helmet on, and his bike thrown into my garden. I ask him if I can help him, and that's when he demands that I return his drone. I ask him why I should, when all he's done with it in my experience is harass me. The kid then starts foot stomping and throwing a shrieking tantrum, demanding that I give the drone back right now. I found that frankly adorable, and I started laughing. That's when I tell him to come back with a parent if he wanted the drone back because he's not capable of acting like a grown-up for the conversation, and I went back inside my house. The kid actually destroyed some of my garden before picking up his bike and going home. Around 6 o'clock that evening, there's another knock at the door, and the kid's back with a man. Now, I think he knew his kid was full of it because he sheepishly asked me if I had robbed his son and stolen the drone. I then smirked a bit at this and told him exactly what his son had done with that drone and how it came into my possession. The dad's face couldn't decide between chagrin and fury, and he turns and asks his son if this is what really happened. It was at that point his son just starts bawling because he knows he's caught. The dad then says to him, "When I bought you that drone, I said there was only one rule. You don't bother people with the drone." The dad then apologizes on his son's behalf, and he says I could keep it because his son wasn't being responsible. Hearing that, the kid emits a squawk of indignation and fury, and he says, "I'm telling Mom. She's always been the better parent." There is then a scuffle between them, and the dad wrangles his kid back to the car they arrived in. The dad then comes back and gives me a cell phone number, with instructions to text him if his ex-wife should darken my doorstep. So a few days later, around lunchtime, I hear an ominous bang sound, followed shortly after by pounding on my front door. Not knocking, it was pounding. As I get closer to the door, I could hear a woman's voice, and I connected some dots. Before opening the door, I found the drone dad contact in my phone, and I texted him saying, "I think she's here." I then opened my door and was greeted by the sight of an extremely irate, slightly younger than usual Karen. When the woman sees me, she starts demanding that I hand over the drone, that I should be ashamed of myself, and how I'm just the worst human being ever to grace the face of the earth, blah blah blah. She's got quite the head of steam worked up, and I can see almost immediately that I'm not allowed to talk. So I decide to pour gasoline on this fire, and I send a follow-up text to her husband that said, "I can see why you got a divorce." Before I can hit send, the woman slaps the phone out of my hand and she tells me to look at her when she's talking to me. Now, I think it's worth noting that this was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and this woman had Merlot breath so strong that I felt I was getting buzzed by being yelled at her. I decide not to entertain this woman, so I pick up my phone and call the police non-emergency line because it's pretty obvious how this is gonna go. When she demands to know who I'm calling, I calmly tell her that I'm calling the police. And her response was, and this is a direct quote, "Good. Let's see how the pigs deal with a weasel like you who steals from children." The operator actually heard that, and I gave her the address, and the operator thanked me and said a response was on the way. It was then that I got a reply from the dad. The dad says, "Oh God, tell me she's not drunk. I'm on my way." It wasn't all that long, maybe 5 to 10 minutes total before the boys in blue showed up. The police separate us, and I actually wind up talking to the cop, who urged me to use the toilet like a civilized human being. I then tell my side of the story, and then the officer I was talking to goes to assist the other officer, who is trying to figure out what the Karen was going on about because she's steadily getting more belligerent and violent. The woman is so drunk, she winds up trying to slap one cop before she's restrained and put in the back of one of the cruisers. It was at this point the dad pulls up and he looks completely aghast, but he does confirm my side of the story with the police. The officers thank me and the dad for our time and promise that a tow truck is coming for the woman's vehicle. I'll spare the details of what happened, it was just police matter at this point. Everybody ended up leaving shortly after. What a crazy post, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure flying a drone over people's private property is a huge no-no. So OP does come back with an update, and trust me guys, it gets worse from here. Okay folks, unhappily enough, this woman has gone where no Karen has gone before. Straight past entitlement. Psychology folks are going to have a field day examining this woman, hopefully someplace far, far away from me. So earlier today, I went to the dog park at the same time that I usually do. I'm a creature of habit. I do the same things every day, and on this day, I take a break from work to go to the dog park for a little bit, before grabbing lunch on my way home. Little did I notice, an SUV was following me. Now, relevant piece of information, I drive a manual car. For those who don't know, making a manual car roll forward on a steep hill from a dead stop isn't precisely simple, and it's very easy to roll back a foot while putting it in gear. So naturally, I was distracted trying to figure out what this SUV was doing that I rolled backwards a little bit, and gave the SUV a love tap because it was that close to me. And yes, the cars collided, and no rational human being would consider that accident worth bothering the police over. There simply wasn't enough room for my car to speed up to a point where anything more severe than a paint smudge could have happened. So of course, feeling the bump of the two cars, my plan was to get off that godforsaken hill and pull over somewhere where there's more room to maneuver than a 2-lane road on a steep slope. So I roll forward and look for a spot with enough space for 2 cars to pull over. Before I even make it a car length, this SUV has started to lay on their horn and flash their high beams at me repeatedly. I proceed with my plan because road safety is a thing they teach in driver's ed. So I pull in, exit my vehicle bracing myself for whatever that's coming, and the SUV proceeds to just sit there. There were no doors open, the car was just ominously idling, and that's when I noticed that it's the mother who came to my doorstep. A few minutes pass, and then 2 police cruisers roar up to us with sirens on, and proceed to block our cars with their cruisers. The officers then get out with their weapons pointed at me. I then recognize the policeman that I'd spoken with a couple of weeks ago, and he returns the favor, followed shortly after by him putting the gun back in its holster. The policeman I recognize says that they got a 911 call about me road raging, hitting random cars, and fleeing the scene of an accident. I tell him, no, I was just leaving the dog park with my dog in the car, and the SUV who was much too close behind me got a love tap. I tell him the woman in the SUV started beeping and flashing like a psycho once I started driving off to find a safe place to pull over, and she's sat there since. They then proceed to walk over to the SUV. When the officer reaches the SUV's window and he sees who it is, his jaw drops. And I kid you not, people, he actually facepalmed. The woman starts screeching about how I rammed her car in reverse and then tried to escape the scene. The officer then regains his composure and asks Karen to step out of her vehicle. She says no, she doesn't have to unless she's been charged with a crime. The officer then informs her that that relates to search, not exiting your vehicle, and that she needs to get out of the car right now. Things devolve rapidly from there. Okay, so the relevant portions of this discussion are that Karen actually spent money on a private investigator to follow me around for 2 days. Once she knew what my daily habits were like, she took it upon herself to actually follow me when I went out. And you might be asking, why would she do this? Well, to gather evidence that would discredit me as a witness in her upcoming custody case. Now, I hate to be that guy, but I really can't provide the conclusion to this saga. as all this just became serious business. Suffice to say, Karen was a very naughty girl, and she just broke about every bail restriction she had to do what she did, and now she's remanded to jail, awaiting trial on a plethora of charges. All charges against Karen ended up being dropped, and she was remanded to an involuntary stay at a state mental health facility. I also learned that responsible dad has permanent custody of the kid until Karen's been declared safe to re-enter society, or however you term someone who once was nuttier than squirrel crap, being let back into the general population. Hopefully she gets her head back on straight. Yeah guys, so that was definitely a wild one. I'm glad the dad got custody of the kid. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's crazy stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'm gonna link it right here. A crazy Karen lets her 5-year-old destroy a store because it's her birthday. It's so ridiculous, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.